Okay, so this is some type of stringed instruments fretboard. This instrument has 7 strings and they are tuned in fourths. For example, B, E, A, D, G, C, and F. But this really isn't important. So we should ignore the string names. We are looking at some point on the fretboard between the neck and the join to the body. On this stringed instrument, we know the root of the chord that is being played is located here. Not just here, but it can also be located in many other places along the fretboard. But for this pattern, we are going to only look at the nearby notes to our original root. For example, an octave of the root could be found here. The next octave up of our original note is located 2 frets towards the body and 2 strings along. 2 plus 2. What about if we wanted to find the 5th of this chord? Where could we find one? The 5th of the chord would be located from our original note 2 frets down and the next string over. The 5th can also be found immediately above the original note on the lowest string next door. Notice as these 2 notes are the same note, just an octave apart, they are, like the 2 roots, 2 frets down and 2 strings across from each other. Where would the 3rd be? There are 2 different types of third, a major third and a minor third. Let's find a major third first. From the original note, the major third would be 1 string higher and 1 fret behind the root. We may as well put in the third an octave higher as well. Again, notice the pattern of the 2 thirds. They form 2 frets apart and 2 strings over, as they are an octave apart. So where could we find a minor third? From our original root note, the minor third is 1 string higher and 2 frets behind, immediately behind the major third. Let's put in some other third locations. Once again, we have the octave higher minor third with the same 2 plus 2 pattern, but also another minor third fairly close by to our original note, so we put that one in too. Similar to thirds, there are 2 types of sevenths. Let's put the sevenths in. The sevenths are immediately behind our roots, and the flat sevenths are immediately behind the major sevenths. If we're trying to locate chord tones on this 7-string instrument, providing we know where to find the root, we know where other chord tone notes can be found close by. For completeness, we could put in the other notes in the key. Let's start with the fourths. Fourths are sandwiched between the root and the flat 7th on adjacent strings, a semitone higher than the major third, all conforming to the 2 plus 2 pattern, making them octaves apart. Now, the seconds. The seconds are a tone higher than the root, also 1 fret, a semitone, behind the flat third. The final note in the scale is the 6th. The 6th can be found 1 tone higher than the 5th, also sandwiched between the major third and the 2nd on neighbouring strings. Because this instrument is tuned where each string is a 4th apart, then the pattern is identical if the root is found elsewhere. Here, the root is on the neighbouring string, but the pattern and relative positions remain identical. and so on. We can shuffle it over again. And once again, the pattern and relative positions remain identical. Obviously, this is also true for moving it up and down the neck as the root moves. However, this will not be entirely transferable for the guitar. So finally, we have a guitar neck with 6 strings, tuned in the conventional way. While a guitar is mainly strung in fourths, like the last example, E, A, D and G, the next string, which would be a C if it was tuned in fourths, is now a B, which is a major third, though that is not important. And then the B to E back to being a fourth apart. So we have one string, the B, that would throw our previous pattern off, unless we think of this B string as a C. To make B into a C, we would need to fret here, 1 fret up on the B string. Similarly, to make the high E string an F string, like our last example, we would need to fret here, 1 fret up on the E string, next door or parallel to the C. So the pattern we looked at on our 7-string instrument would almost work, but we would need to make an adjustment on the B string, moving the notes in the key 1 fret down towards the guitar body. We would also need to move the pattern on the high E 1 fret down, but the B and E string relative to each other would be identical to the C and F string from our last example. What would our notes in a key look like on a guitar? Once again, we've located the root, and once again, we can locate the octave. As we're not using the B string, no adjustment is needed. The location is identical to before, 2 plus 2. Similarly, we can add the fifths, and as we're not using the B string, no adjustment is needed. The location is identical to before, 2 plus 2. And we can add the major thirds. However, this time, the higher octave third is using the B string, so we need to remember to shuffle it up 1 fret, like this. Then add the minor thirds. Again, the higher octave minor third is using the B string, so you must remember to shuffle up 1 fret, so it sits a semitone below the major third on the B string, the same as it does on the D string. Next, the sevenths. Sevenths are a semitone behind the root, not using the B string, so simple 2 plus 2, and the flat sevenths. Not using the B string, so simple 2 plus 2. The fourths. The fourths sit a semitone higher than the third. So again, we shuffle up 1 fret on the B string. Let's add the seconds. Note the second on the B string shuffles up, so it's a semitone behind the flat third. Now, the final note of the scale, the sixth. Not using the B string, so no adjustment needed. Simply using 2 plus 2. As before, we can also move this pattern with no changes required going up and down the neck, same as for the last instrument, depending on where the root is. But if the root is on a neighbouring string, we need to be mindful of the B and E strings. We can't simply shuffle the pattern over like this. Instead, we need to make the adjustment for the B string and E string like this. For completeness, as the top and bottom strings are both E, then the string pattern is mirrored, like this. So, from knowing where the root is, you can locate nearby notes in the scale. Ideally, as a minimum, knowing the note locations on the bottom E and bottom A strings would be sufficient, as it is fairly straightforward locating their octave positions on the higher strings. And remember to add a fret when crossing the B string.